Sergeant Marcus Webb sat in the debriefing room with empty eyes. The metal chair felt cold beneath him, but he barely noticed. Around the table, officers from different alien species watched him with expressions he couldn't read. Some had 4 eyes, some had scales. One looked like a giant insect covered in purple armor. "You are the only survivor," Commander Vrath said. The massive reptilian creature leaned forward, his clawed hands resting on the table. "Explain how this happened." Marcus's throat felt tight. "We followed protocol. The mission plan was solid, but the Void Swarm was waiting for us." "Waiting?" Vrath's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You believe they knew you were coming?" "Yes, sir." Marcus stared at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. "They had 3 times the forces we expected. My team, they fought hard. They gave me time to get the data package out." The insectoid officer, Dr. Sharon, clicked her mandibles together. "The data was recovered. The mission was technically successful." Successful. Marcus wanted to laugh, but he knew if he started, he might not stop. 7 people dead, 7 friends. But the mission was successful. "Sergeant Webb is dismissed," Vrath said finally. "Report to medical for evaluation." Marcus stood up slowly. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He saluted, but his hand trembled so badly that he dropped it quickly. No one said anything about it. They just watched him leave with those alien eyes that saw too much. The medical bay cleared him after an hour of scans. Physically, he was fine. The doctor, a gray-skinned creature with too many fingers, gave him pills for sleep and told him to rest. Marcus nodded and left, knowing he wouldn't take them. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of his squad. Forward Operating Base Terminus was a massive structure built into an asteroid. It housed over 3,000 soldiers from 20 different species. The corridors were wide enough for the largest aliens to pass through comfortably, which made Marcus feel small. He'd felt small a lot lately. He walked through the base without seeing it. People moved around him. Some were human, most weren't. They all had places to be, things to do. Marcus just walked. In his quarters, he opened his locker. Inside were the personal effects of his squad. 7 small bags, each tagged with a name. Inside were things that meant nothing to anyone else, but everything to the people who were gone. ID tags. Letters that would never be sent home. A small toy that Private Chen carried for luck. A photo of Corporal Rivera's family. Marcus picked up a piece of paper from Corporal Anderson's bag. It was a drawing done in crayon by Anderson's 5-year-old daughter. Stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "Daddy and me," written in clumsy letters across the top. Anderson would never see his daughter again, never hold her, never explain why he had to go fight in a war so far from home. Marcus's chest felt too tight. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to be anywhere but here. The base had a memorial garden. It was a strange place, built by the Coalition's diplomats to honor all the dead, regardless of species. There were plants from 100 different worlds, all growing together under artificial lights that mimicked different suns. Some areas glowed red, some glowed blue. In the center, under white light that felt almost like Earth's sun, was a quiet space with benches. Humans weren't the only ones who needed places to remember their dead. But tonight, Marcus needed to be alone. He checked the schedule. The garden was officially closed for maintenance. Perfect. He used his security clearance to override the lock and slipped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss. Silence wrapped around him like a blanket. The only sounds were the gentle hum of air processors and the quiet drip of water from the irrigation system. Marcus walked to the center section and sat on a bench. He put the drawing on his lap and looked at it. Such a simple picture, such pure love in every wobbly line. His hands were still shaking. They hadn't stopped since the mission. Maybe they'd never stop. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty garden. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. He'd been the squad leader. It was his job to bring them home, all of them. But he'd failed. 7 people trusted him with their lives, and he'd let them die. The pressure in his chest grew worse. His throat closed up. His eyes burned. For 3 days, Marcus had held it together. He'd written reports. He'd answered questions. He'd kept his face blank and his voice steady. That's what soldiers did. That's what leaders did. But here, in the darkness and silence, with only the plants to witness him, something inside Marcus finally broke. The first sob came out like a cough. The second one was louder. Then they just kept coming, one after another, until Marcus was bent over with his face in his hands, crying like he hadn't cried since he was a child. He cried for Anderson and his little girl who drew pictures of her daddy. He cried for Chen and her luck that ran out. He cried for Rivera and his big family who waited for him at home. He cried for all of them, and he cried for himself because he lived and they didn't. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And there was nothing he could do to change it. Marcus didn't know how long he sat there. Time felt strange, like it was moving too fast and too slow at the same time. He clutched the drawing in his hands, careful not to wrinkle it, and let the grief pour out of him. He didn't notice the 3 shadows that moved at the edge of the garden. He didn't see the 6 glowing eyes watching him from the darkness. He didn't hear the soft scrape of claws on metal as something large and dangerous crept closer. Marcus was alone with his pain, unaware that he wasn't alone at all. In the shadows, 3 young Krethak predators watched the human soldier cry. They'd been taught that tears were weakness. They'd been raised to believe that warriors who broke down like this deserved only death or exile. But as they watched, something unexpected happened. Something their trainers never prepared them for. Something that went deeper than culture or training or species. They felt the overwhelming need to protect him. Kessa's tail twitched as she watched the human from behind a cluster of blue-leaved plants. Next to her, her brothers Thex and Rin stayed perfectly still. They'd been trained since hatching to move without sound, to watch without being seen. Tonight's exercise was supposed to teach them advanced stalking techniques, but this wasn't what they expected to find. "What is he doing?" Rin whispered, his voice so quiet it was barely a breath. "Crying," Thex answered, his analytical mind already working through what they were seeing. "Humans leak water from their eyes when distressed." "I know what crying is," Kessa hissed back. "But why is a warrior doing it? Father says warriors who cry are weak, broken, dangerous." The 3 young Krethak had grown up hearing stories about their species' greatest shame. Long ago, a Krethak warrior had broken down during battle. He'd cried and refused to fight. His weakness had cost lives. Since then, any Krethak who showed such emotion was removed from service, sometimes permanently, but this human wasn't Krethak. And watching him didn't make Kessa feel disgusted or superior. It made her feel something else entirely, something uncomfortable in her chest. "We should report this," Thex said, but his voice lacked conviction. "If a warrior is broken, command needs to know." "Look at his scent markers," Rin said. "Their species could see heat and chemical signatures in ways humans couldn't. He's not sick, not injured in body, but the stress hormones are very high." Kessa tilted her head. Rin was the smallest of them, the one their father worried about most. But Rin always noticed things others missed. He was right. The human's body chemistry showed pain, but not the kind that medicine could fix. The human made another sound, a broken sob that echoed in the quiet garden. His shoulders shook. He held something in his hands, a piece of paper, like it was precious and fragile. Something deep in Kessa's brain responded to that sound. An instinct older than training, older than culture. She remembered when Rin had been injured as a hatchling. He'd fallen during climbing practice and broken his arm. The pain had made him cry out, and immediately every adult Krethak nearby had rushed to protect him. They'd formed a circle around him, facing outward, keeping danger away while he healed. That's what her body wanted to do now. Form a circle. Protect. Keep safe. "This is wrong," Kessa said quietly. "He sounds like Pack, like family." "He's not Pack," Thex argued. "He's not even Krethak. He's an alien." "But we fight together," Rin said. "Father says the coalition makes us all brothers in battle. Doesn't that make us Pack?" It was a dangerous question. Their culture didn't really see it that way. Krethak fought alongside aliens out of necessity, not brotherhood. But Rin's words felt true in a way their training didn't. "If he was Krethak and we saw this, we'd report him," Thex said. He was trying to think through the problem logically. "But human rules might be different. Maybe they allow this behavior." "He came here alone," Kessa observed. "He made sure no one would see him. That means he knows others would judge him for it, just like we would judge a Krethak." They watched in silence for another minute. The human's crying had gotten quieter, but it hadn't stopped. He spoke to the darkness in his language, words they'd learned in their mixed species training. "I'm sorry. I should have saved you. I should have been faster, stronger, better." The words hit Kessa harder than she expected. He wasn't crying because he was hurt. He was crying because others were hurt, because his pack was gone, and he survived. That wasn't weakness. That was... "He's pack wounded," Kessa said suddenly. The concept clicked into place. "When a pack member dies, survivors grieve. It's normal, healthy even. My instructor mentioned it once." "Krethak don't grieve," Thex pointed out. "We're taught not to," Rin corrected. "That's different. Maybe it's not better." Kessa made a decision. She stood up from their hiding place. Her brothers both grabbed at her, but she shook them off. "What are you doing?" Thex demanded. "What we're supposed to do," Kessa said firmly. "Protect Pack. He's not—" "Yes, he is. You feel it too. I know you do." Thex went quiet. He did feel it. They all did. Every instinct in their predator brains screamed at them that this was a wounded pack member who needed protection. Fighting that instinct felt wrong. "If we do this, Father will be angry," Thex warned. "Probably," Kessa agreed. "But I'd rather face Father's anger than abandon someone who needs help." Rin stood up next to his sister. "I agree. We help him." Thex hesitated, then sighed and rose to his feet. "This is a terrible idea, but I'm not letting you two do it alone." They moved quietly through the garden, but they made enough noise that the human would hear them coming. Surprising him seemed like a bad idea. Humans were dangerous when startled, and this one was a trained soldier. Marcus's head snapped up. His hand went to his side, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. His eyes were red and wet, his face marked with tears. When he saw 3 young Krethak emerging from the shadows, his expression shifted to confusion. Krethak cubs weren't small. Even young, they were the size of large earth dogs, with scales harder than leather and claws that could rip through metal. 3 of them together could easily kill an unarmed human. But Marcus didn't run. He just watched them approach, his body tense but not aggressive. Kessa led the way. She'd raided the supply cache on the way here, knowing they'd need offerings. Pack-wounded members needed care. That's what the instinct demanded. She placed a ration bar at Marcus's feet. Thex added a water container. Rin carefully set down a thermal blanket, the kind used in field medical kits. Marcus stared at the items, then at the 3 young predators. "What are you doing?" Kessa couldn't explain in his language. Her vocal cords weren't built for human speech, but she could show him. She moved to his right side and sat down, facing away from him, watching the door. Thex took the left. Rin, after a moment's hesitation, pressed against Marcus's side, offering warmth and protection. They formed a protective triangle around him, a guard position, the same formation adult Krethak used to protect injured pack members in the field. Marcus's breath caught. "You're Guarding me? Kessa made a low rumble in her throat. The sound meant yes in Krethak body language. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus's shoulders started shaking again, but this time, when he cried, he wasn't alone. He reached out with one shaking hand and placed it on Rin's scaled head. The touch was gentle, grateful. Rin leaned into it. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "Thank you." The three cubs maintained their vigil. They didn't understand everything about humans. They didn't know if what they were doing was right by their culture's standards. But deep in their bones, in a place older than words or rules, they knew this was exactly what they were supposed to do. Protect the pack. Always. The hours passed slowly in the memorial garden. Marcus had stopped crying, but the cubs didn't move from their positions. Kessa watched the door with sharp eyes. Thex monitored the shadows. Rin stayed pressed against Marcus's side, a warm presence in the cool air. Marcus found himself talking. He didn't plan to. The words just came out, like they'd been trapped inside him and finally found a way free. "Her name was Anderson," he said quietly, looking at the drawing still in his hands. "Corporal Jennifer Anderson. She had a daughter, 5 years old. She drew this picture before Anderson deployed. Daddy and me, she called it. But Anderson was her mom, not her dad. The kid just called her daddy anyway. Anderson thought it was funny." None of the cubs responded, but their ears swiveled toward him. They were listening. "Anderson was tough. Best shot in the squad. She could hit a target from 2,000 meters in high wind. But she cried every time we video called home and her daughter sang to her." Marcus smiled a little at the memory. "Said it was allergies. We all knew it wasn't. We just didn't call her on it." He carefully folded the drawing and put it in his pocket. Safe. Protected. Chen carried a lucky coin. She flipped it before every mission. Said her grandmother gave it to her. Said it would keep her safe. Marcus's voice cracked. It didn't. But I guess luck runs out eventually. Chen knew that. She used to joke that she was saving up all her good luck for when she really needed it. I guess she needed more than she had. Kessa made a soft sound, almost like a whine. Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You understand, don't you?" he said. "Maybe not the words, but you understand." He continued talking through the night, telling stories about each member of his squad. Rivera, who sent half his pay home to his family every month. Patterson, who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Williams, who sang old Earth songs badly but enthusiastically. Torres, who kept everyone's spirits up with terrible jokes. And Brooks, the rookie who'd just joined them and was so eager to prove himself. Brooks was 20 years old, Marcus said. 20. He should have had his whole life ahead of him. Should have gone home, found someone to love, had kids of his own. Instead, he died on a frozen rock in a war he didn't start, fighting for people who aren't even his species. The weight of it pressed down on Marcus again. All those lives, all those futures, gone. And for what? Territory? Resources? Pride? "I don't know if it's worth it," Marcus admitted. "I don't know if any war is worth this much death." But Brooks believed it was. They all did. They believed we were protecting something important. Protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Rin shifted closer, his scales warm against Marcus's side. The physical contact helped. It reminded Marcus that he wasn't alone, even if his squad was gone. "I'm supposed to be strong," Marcus continued. "Leaders don't break down. Leaders don't cry. Leaders hold it together so everyone else can fall apart if they need to. But right now, I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm made of broken glass, and if anyone touches me wrong, I'll just shatter completely." Thex turned his head slightly, one large eye focusing on Marcus. In the dim light, the eye reflected colors Marcus couldn't name. "Your species probably handles this better," Marcus said to the cubs. "You look like warriors, born for battle, humans, We're not built for war. We're built for building things, growing things, creating things. We had to learn how to fight. And we're good at it now. Maybe too good, but it costs us. Every time. It costs us pieces of ourselves. The garden's artificial lighting began to shift, simulating dawn. Soft, pink light filtered through the plants, painting everything in gentle colors. Marcus realized he'd been here for hours. His throat was raw from talking and crying. His eyes felt swollen. But something inside him felt lighter. The grief wasn't gone. It would never be gone. But it was bearable now, shared, witnessed, validated. "Thank you," Marcus said again, looking at each of the cubs. "I don't know why you did this. I don't know if you even understand what I've been saying. But thank you for staying. Thank you for not leaving me alone with this." Kessa stood up suddenly, her body going rigid. Her attention locked on the garden entrance. A second later, Thex and Rin did the same. They positioned themselves between Marcus and the door, their bodies low and ready. Someone was coming. Marcus heard it now, too. Heavy footsteps, multiple someones. He stood up quickly, his soldier training kicking in. He was in a restricted area without authorization. He had 3 alien cubs with him who were supposed to be in their quarters. This was going to be difficult to explain. The door opened with a hiss. Commander Vrath entered, followed by 2 other adult Krethak warriors. Vrath's massive form filled the doorway. His scales were a deep red-brown color, darker than his children's lighter tones. His eyes swept the garden and locked onto the scene before him. Marcus stood at attention immediately. "Commander, I can explain—" But Vrath wasn't looking at him. He was staring at his cubs, who were standing protectively in front of the human soldier. His expression was unreadable. "Kessa, Thex, Rin." Vrath's voice was dangerously quiet. "Explain why you are not in your quarters. Explain why you are here with this soldier." Kessa didn't back down. She raised her head high, meeting her father's gaze directly. When she spoke, it was in the Krethak language, a series of growls and clicks that Marcus couldn't understand. But he understood the tone, defiant, determined, unashamed. Thex added something, his tone more measured but equally firm. Rin said nothing, but he moved even closer to Marcus, making his allegiance clear. Vrath's eyes narrowed. He responded in their language, his voice getting louder. The other 2 warriors shifted uncomfortably. Whatever was being said, it wasn't good. Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, this is my fault. I came here without proper authorization. Your cubs were just—" "Silent," Vrath commanded in English. His attention turned to Marcus fully. "You will speak when spoken to, Sergeant." Marcus's jaw clenched, but he obeyed. He'd dealt with commanders like this before. Rigid, by the book. The kind who saw any deviation from protocol as a personal insult. Vrath moved closer, his massive form towering over both Marcus and the cubs. He looked down at the offerings still on the ground. The ration bar, the water, the blanket. His gaze shifted to Marcus's face, taking in the obvious signs of crying. "You were grieving," Vrath stated. "Yes, sir. Publicly displaying weakness." Marcus bristled at that. "Respectfully, sir, processing grief isn't weakness. It's human biology. We need to—" "I did not ask for your opinion on human biology." Vrath's voice cut through Marcus's explanation like a knife. The commander circled the group slowly, examining everything. The cubs tracked his movement but didn't leave their positions around Marcus. That seemed to catch Vrath's attention more than anything else. "My children performed a protective formation," Vrath said slowly, "around an alien. They brought offerings. They maintained a vigil." He looked at his cubs, something complicated crossing his face. "These are behaviors reserved for pack, for family." "Sir, they helped me," Marcus said quietly. "I don't know why they did it, but they stayed with me when I needed someone. They showed me kindness when I felt completely alone. Whatever punishment is coming for this, give it to me, not them. They were just trying to help. Vrath was silent for a long moment. The tension in the garden was thick enough to cut. The two warriors behind him waited for orders. The cubs stood firm. Marcus prepared himself for the consequences. Finally, Vrath spoke. All of you. With me. Now. It wasn't a request. As they filed out of the garden, Marcus caught Kessa's eye. She looked worried now, probably realizing the trouble they were all in. But underneath the worry, there was no regret. Marcus understood. He felt the same way. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't regret this night. He'd been alone with his grief, and 3 alien cubs had seen him at his lowest and chose to stay. That meant something. That meant everything. Commander Vrath's office was designed for intimidation. The walls were decorated with weapons from Krethak history. Battle honors hung in precise rows. Everything was sharp angles and hard surfaces. Marcus stood at attention in the center of the room while the 3 cubs sat in what was clearly a punishment position near the wall. Vrath paced behind his desk, his claws clicking on the metal floor. He hadn't spoken since they'd arrived. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, he stopped and looked directly at Marcus. "You are dismissed, Sergeant. Report to your quarters and await further instruction." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, the cubs are my responsibility, not yours. You are dismissed." There was no room for argument in that tone. Marcus saluted and left, casting one last glance at the cubs. Kessa met his eyes and flicked her tail in what he hoped was reassurance. Once the human was gone, Vrath turned his full attention to his children who had violated protocol, abandoned their training exercise, and worst of all, shown weakness by caring for an alien's emotional display. "Explain," he commanded. Kessa spoke first, as she usually did. "We were tracking targets for our night exercise. We followed the human's scent trail to the memorial garden. We observed him experiencing distress. And your decision was to reveal yourselves, to provide comfort, to perform a protective vigil?" Vrath's voice was harsh. "Do you understand what you did? In our culture, what you witnessed should have been reported immediately. A warrior displaying such weakness is a liability." "He wasn't weak," Rin said quietly. All eyes turned to him. The smallest cub rarely spoke up, especially not to contradict their father. But now his voice was steady. "He was injured, pack wounded. We responded appropriately." Appropriately. Vrath's scales ruffled, a sign of agitation. "Humans are not pack. They are allies of convenience, nothing more." "That's not what you taught us," Thex said. His analytical mind was working through the problem logically. "You said the coalition makes us brothers in battle. You said we protect those who fight beside us. The human fights beside us. Therefore, we protect him. The human was not under physical attack. He was crying." "Because his pack died," Kessa said firmly. "All of them. He was the only survivor. He carries their belongings. He speaks their names. He honors their memory. This is pack behavior. Grief is the price of love for pack. You taught us this." Vrath's jaw clenched. His children were using his own words against him, and they weren't wrong. He had taught them that pack bonds were sacred. He'd taught them that warriors protect their pack no matter what. But he hadn't meant for them to include aliens in that definition. "You will stay in your quarters until I decide on appropriate consequences," Vrath said finally. "Training is suspended. You will have no contact with the human soldier. Is this understood?" "Yes, Father," they said in unison. After they left, Vrath sat heavily in his chair. His head ached. The situation was more complicated than a simple breach of protocol. His cubs had bonded with the human. Their instincts had recognized him as pack. That shouldn't be possible. But clearly it was. He needed answers. He contacted Dr. Sharon, the base's chief medical officer. Meanwhile, in their quarters, Thex accessed the base's database. If he couldn't have contact with Marcus, he'd at least understand what had happened. He searched for information about human emotional responses, grief behaviors, and bonding patterns. What he found was fascinating. "Listen to this," he said to his siblings. "Humans form pack bonds with almost any species. On their homeworld, they bonded with wolves and created a new species called dogs. They bonded with small predators called cats. They even bonded with birds of prey. Their ability to create cross-species emotional connections is unmatched in known biology." "Why would evolution favor that?" Kessa asked, peering at the screen. "Survival advantage. Humans are physically weak compared to most predators, but they're social geniuses. They survived by making other predator species want to protect them. By creating families that crossed species lines." Rin moved closer to read the data. "It says here that humans produce specific chemical signals when they're grieving. Pheromones that trigger nurturing responses in species with pack instincts." "So it wasn't just us being soft," Kessa said. "Our biology responded to his biology." "Exactly. And look at this." Thex pulled up another file. "Combat units with humans show 40% higher survival rates than units without humans. Mixed species teams bond faster and fight better when humans are present. It's being studied as a strategic advantage." The three cubs looked at each other. They hadn't failed their training. They'd responded exactly as their biology was designed to respond. The human hadn't manipulated them. He'd simply been human, and their predator instincts had done the rest. "Father needs to see this," Rin said. In Vrath's office, Dr. Sharon arrived carrying several data pads. The insectoid doctor settled into a chair designed for her species and activated a holographic display. "You asked about human emotional behavior and its effects on other species," she said. "The answer is more interesting than you might expect." Vrath watched as the display showed chemical structures and biological data. Explain it simply. Humans evolved as persistence predators. They couldn't outrun or overpower their prey, so they outlasted it. This required exceptional endurance and unparalleled social cooperation. To achieve this, they developed what I call empathy broadcasting. Empathy broadcasting? When humans experience strong emotions, especially grief, they release a complex cocktail of pheromones and chemical signals. These signals are designed to attract help and support from their own species. But there's an unexpected side effect. These signals also trigger protective responses in other species with pack or herd instincts. Dr. Sharon pulled up more data. On Earth, humans bonded with wolves by essentially hijacking their pack instincts. The wolves saw humans as pack members who needed protection, especially human young. Over thousands of years, this created a new species entirely devoted to humans. Dogs, they're called. The relationship is so strong that dogs often choose humans over their own kind. "You're saying the human affected my cubs the same way?" "Your cubs have strong pack instincts. They're predators who rely on family units for survival and success. When they observed the human in distress, producing these chemical signals, their biology responded automatically. They perceived a pack member in need of protection." Vrath was silent, processing this information. Dr. Sharon continued. "This isn't weakness, Commander. It's actually quite sophisticated. Humans are what I call social force multipliers. They don't make combat units stronger through physical power. They make units stronger by creating emotional bonds so powerful that soldiers will die for each other. Not out of duty, but out of genuine love. Love is not a tactical advantage, isn't it? Would you fight harder for a random ally or for someone you consider family? Humans turn allies into family. It's their evolutionary superpower, and it works on almost everyone, including species like yours who think they're immune to such things." Vrath's claws tapped on his desk. "So my cubs weren't being foolish. They were being biological." "Correct. And from what I understand, they acted appropriately for pack members encountering an injured family member. The offerings, the protective formation, the vigil, these are all classic pack behaviors. Your cubs recognized the human as pack and responded as they were designed to respond. But he's not Krethak. No, but he fights beside you. He bleeds beside you. He grieves for his lost pack members, which shows he forms deep bonds. To your cub's instincts, that's enough to qualify him as family. Dr. Sharon leaned forward. Commander, I've been studying mixed species units across the Coalition. The most effective teams all have one thing in common. They include humans. Not because humans are the best fighters, but because humans make everyone else fight better. They create bonds that transcend species. They turn military units into families. She pulled up casualty reports. Look at these numbers. Units with humans show dramatically lower casualty rates. Not because humans prevent injuries, but because bonded units protect each other more fiercely. They communicate better. They take fewer risks. They work as true packs rather than collections of individuals. Vrath studied the data. It was undeniable. The numbers didn't lie. Your cubs didn't make a mistake, Dr. Sharon said softly. They recognized something valuable, something powerful. The question is, will you punish them for following their instincts, or will you acknowledge that perhaps those instincts are wiser than our cultural assumptions? After the doctor left, Vrath sat alone with his thoughts. He'd built his entire career on strength, on discipline, on the belief that emotional displays were dangerous weakness. But what if he was wrong? What if emotional connection was actually a different kind of strength? He thought about the human, Marcus. The soldier had lost his entire squad and still functioned, still reported for duty, still did his job. That wasn't weakness. That was incredible strength. And his cubs, who defied orders to protect someone in pain, that wasn't softness. That was courage. Maybe it was time for Vrath to reconsider what strength really meant. Marcus was working on equipment maintenance when his door chimed. He'd been confined to quarters for 2 days, with no word about what was happening. No punishment, no explanation. Just waiting. "Enter," he called. Commander Vrath stepped inside. The massive Krethak had to duck slightly to fit through the human-sized doorway. Marcus stood immediately, coming to attention. "At ease, Sergeant." Vrath's voice was different than before, less harsh. "I owe you an explanation." Marcus relaxed slightly but said nothing. He'd learned that with officers like Vrath, it was better to wait. "I have reviewed the incident in the Memorial Garden," Vrath continued. "I have consulted with medical staff and reviewed relevant research. I have also spoken extensively with my cubs." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "In my culture, emotional display is considered dangerous weakness. A warrior who cries is a warrior who cannot be trusted in combat. This belief is thousands of years old. It is deeply ingrained in everything we are." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand, sir. But understanding my culture and understanding truth are not always the same thing." Vrath moved further into the room. "Dr. Sharon explained to me how human biology affects other species, how your grief signals triggered protective instincts in my cubs. They were not being weak. They were being what nature designed them to be." "Sir, they helped me," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever their reasons, biological or otherwise, they saw someone in pain and they helped. That's not weakness. That's compassion." "Agreed." The word came out rough, like it was difficult for Vrath to say. "Which is why I have decided not to punish them, or you. Instead, I am making changes to our training protocols." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Sir, you will begin training with Krethak combat units. My cubs specifically requested to train alongside you. I have approved this request. We will learn how mixed species units can work more effectively together." It wasn't what Marcus expected, but he found himself nodding. "I'd be honored, sir." Vrath turned to leave, then stopped. "Sergeant Webb, my cubs believe you are Pack. I am beginning to think they may be correct. Do not make me regret this decision." "I won't, sir." Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus trained with the Krethak units. It was brutal work. Krethak combat training was designed for creatures twice his size and 3 times his strength, but Marcus adapted. He learned to use his smaller size as an advantage. He learned to read Krethak body language, and slowly, the adult warriors began to accept him. The cubs were his constant companions. Kessa pushed him to move faster. Thex taught him tactical thinking from a Krethak perspective. Rin, quiet Rin, seemed to know when Marcus was struggling and would press against his side in silent support. Other soldiers noticed, human and alien alike. They saw the Krethak cubs following Marcus like shadows. They saw how the adult Krethak warriors no longer ignored the human sergeant, but included him in their discussions. Word spread about what had happened in the garden. Different versions of the story circulated through the base. Some accurate, some wildly exaggerated, but the core truth remained. A human soldier had cried, and predator cubs had chosen to protect him. Then the Void Swarm attacked. The warning sirens shrieked through forward operating base terminus at 300 hours. Marcus rolled out of his bunk, already reaching for his gear. His door opened before he could reach it. 3 Krethak cubs burst in, their scales reflecting the red emergency lighting. "Big attack," Kessa said in halting English. She'd been practicing. "Many ships. We fight together." Marcus nodded, strapping on his armor. "Stay close to me. Protect each other. Understood?" "Understood, Pack Leader Marcus." The title made Marcus pause, but there was no time to address it. They ran through the corridors toward the assembly points. Around them, the base erupted into controlled chaos. Soldiers from 20 species mobilized for combat. Commander Vrath was already directing his forces when Marcus arrived. The commander's eyes found his cubs, then Marcus, and something passed between them, an understanding, a trust. "Sergeant Webb, you're with my unit," Vrath ordered. "Keep my cubs alive." "With my life, sir." The battle was brutal. The Void Swarm came in larger numbers than expected, their ships tearing into the base's outer defenses. Marcus fought alongside the Krethak warriors, his human weapons complementing their natural ferocity. The cubs, though young, fought like they'd been born for it, which Marcus supposed they had been. But they also stayed together, protecting each other's flanks, working as a true unit. Then it happened. A swarm fighter broke through the defensive line, its weapons targeting a group of wounded soldiers being evacuated. Marcus saw it before anyone else. He ran, knowing he wouldn't make it in time, but running anyway because that's what you did. You tried. He threw himself over 3 injured soldiers as the blast hit. His armor took most of it, but the impact drove him to the ground. Pain exploded through his left side. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Through his blurred vision, Marcus saw the swarm fighter circling for another pass. The wounded soldiers beneath him were crying out. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arms wouldn't respond. Then 3 shapes positioned themselves over Marcus and the wounded. 3 young Krethak, forming a protective triangle facing outward, just like they had in the garden. The swarm fighter fired. The cubs held their position. And then Commander Vrath was there, along with a dozen adult Krethak warriors. They formed a larger circle around the cubs, around Marcus, around the wounded. A wall of scales and fury that the swarm fighter couldn't penetrate. Other soldiers saw it, human, Krethak, and others. They saw the protective formation. They saw how the Krethak fought harder, fiercer, when protecting their pack. And they understood something fundamental about combat that the Coalition had forgotten. Units that love each other fight better. More soldiers joined the circle. Species that normally kept to themselves suddenly worked as one. The defensive formation held. The swarm fighter was destroyed. And slowly, Through sheer determination and unity, the coalition forces pushed back the attack. Marcus woke up in medical bay 3 days later. His left side was wrapped in bandages and synthetic skin. Everything hurt, but he was alive. Rin was curled up on the foot of his bed, asleep. Kessa and Thex were slumped in chairs nearby, also sleeping. They'd clearly been there for a while. Commander Vrath sat in the corner, awake and watching. "They refused to leave," Vrath said quietly when he saw Marcus was awake. "I ordered them to their quarters multiple times. They ignored me. I could have forced them, but—" He paused. "Pack doesn't leave pack wounded. You taught them that. Or perhaps they taught us." Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He placed a hand on Rin's sleeping form. "You saved those soldiers," Vrath continued. "You took a blast meant for them. My cubs protected you while you were down. Then my warriors protected all of you. The formation held because every warrior there understood they were fighting for family, not just allies." "That's what humans do," Marcus managed to say. "We make family out of whoever stands beside us." "I am beginning to understand this," Vrath stood. "The Coalition High Command has taken notice of the battle. Units that fought together across species lines showed significantly higher effectiveness. They are studying what they call the human effect. They want to integrate humans into more combat units." "We're not magic," Marcus said. "We just care, sometimes too much. There is no such thing as caring too much for pack." Vrath moved toward the door, then stopped. "My cubs have requested formal adoption of you into our clan. It is a rare honor, one I have granted. If you accept, you will be family in truth, not just in spirit." Marcus looked at the 3 sleeping cubs, at these alien predators who had seen him at his lowest and chosen to stay, who had protected him when he was wounded, who had taught their entire species that compassion wasn't weakness. "I accept," Marcus said. "I'd be honored to be family." Vrath's expression shifted into what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with Krethak facial structure. "Welcome to the clan, pack brother Marcus." 6 months later, Marcus led a mixed-species special operations unit known throughout the Coalition as the Pack. His team consisted of humans, Krethak, and half a dozen other species. They were the most requested unit for critical missions. The memorial garden had new names on its walls now. Some human, some Krethak. Some species Marcus was still learning about. He visited regularly, never hiding his grief, never apologizing for his tears. And he was never alone. Sometimes it was the cubs, now larger and fiercer, but still his constant shadows. Sometimes it was Commander Vrath, who had learned that strength came in many forms. Sometimes it was members of his unit, different species standing together in silence. On this particular evening, Marcus sat on his usual bench, holding a new letter. Private Chen's family had written to thank him for bringing her lucky coin home. He cried while reading it, tears running freely down his face. Kessa settled on his right, Thex on his left. Rin pressed against his side. "Pack wounded," Rin said softly. His English was nearly perfect now. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "But I'm not alone." "Never alone," Kessa confirmed. "Pack stays together." Around them, more figures emerged from the shadows. Warriors from a dozen species, all coming to stand vigil. Because they'd learned something important from the humans, from Marcus. Grief wasn't weakness. Tears weren't surrender. Compassion wasn't soft. These were the things that made them stronger. These were the things that made them family. These were the things that made them truly undefeatable, not because they couldn't feel pain, but because they felt it together. And in a galaxy full of warriors who fought alone, that made all the difference.